everybody. Welcome back. I'm Susan Lindner, your host of the Innovation Storytellers Show, where we help you, amazing innovators, to better tell your stories, to get the resources and the runway and the recognition you deserve for your breakthrough idea. And it's one of the reasons why I'm so excited to have Bill Powers and Hari Balakrishnan on my show today, because they are two, they won't say it pioneers, but I will. Folks who have really broken through the telematics space. And if you don't know what that is, I encourage you to stay tuned and listen, because we're going to have a fascinating conversation about it. But first, let me introduce you to my guests. So Hari Balakrishnan is the Fujitsu Professor of Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence at the Department of Electrical Engineering and Computer Science at MIT. Hari and Bill are the co-founders of Cambridge Mobile Telematics, where Hari is currently the CTO and Bill is the CEO. So Hari's research is in networked computer systems, and with current interests in networking and sensing and perception for sensor-equipped mobile devices connected to cloud or edge services. And he has made incredible contributions to mobile and sensor computing, overlay and peer-to-peer networks, congestion control, internet routing, and data management, all those things that make the internet and its ensuing applications run flawlessly. We need folks like this, of course. Bill Powers' leadership has transformed CMT from a small MIT startup into the world's largest telematics service provider, achieving unicorn status. So entrepreneurs out there, listen up, there will be tips. To date, CMT has measured and protected over 40 million drivers and powers 110 telematics programs globally. In 2018, CMT secured $500 million in investment from SoftBank's Vision Fund, one of the largest tech investments in Massachusetts history, which is no small shakes given the powerhouses that have come out of Cambridge and Boston since Internet 1.0. So I just want to thank you both, Hari and Bill, for joining me today. I'm so looking forward to this conversation about telematics, which I think a bunch of my listeners probably don't know what telematics is. So can you share with us a little bit more detailed in layman's terms about how we think about telematics, how we interact with telematics?
Thank you, Susan, for having Bill and me on the show. We're really excited to be here. So yeah, you asked what telematics is. It is quite simply the technology and services to measure driving. And what I mean by that is the use of sensors such as accelerometers and GPS and gyroscopes and other sensors to understand how a vehicle is driving and how people are driving their vehicles. And this is now a 20-plus-year journey. It started originally, for me personally, my journey started in academia at MIT with a research project called Cartel, where prior to the advent of iPhones and Androids, my colleague Sam Madden and I had this idea to measure driving and road conditions and transportation using devices in vehicles. And fast forward to today, what's happened is that every consumer device we know of, such as our phones, as well as very inexpensive Internet of Things devices, and now vehicles themselves, have the ability to measure driving quality. So that's what telematics is about. And we can use this now for a lot of very powerful purposes. One, with understanding measurement, we can now provide ways in which people could become better drivers. And that leads to the mission of us at our mission at CMT, which is to make driving safe and sustainable around the world. We can use it to improve driving, and if people were to get into a crash, identify that crash in real time using sensor technologies and AI to then deliver roadside assistance and emergency services to people.
Yeah, and I think this is the place where insurance and technology has really found its real happy place, right? We've seen developments in insurtech over time, but this is the place where the consumer insurance and technology have really found a real breakthrough, both in improving drivers' ability to understand their own driving. We all think we're phenomenal drivers, don't we? And it also gives the insurance industry insights into driving behavior that probably they never had before, with real data in real time. That's not a small thing.
Yes, indeed. I think prior to the work that we did, telematics has been around, but primarily used in the context of commercial drivers and fleets. I think we were among the first to really both develop and then to scale out, bringing telematics into the consumer landscape. And insurance is certainly the lead industry, but it's all of mobility. It's insurance companies, it's ride share and delivery companies, it's car makers, and also the public sector and government agencies being able to take advantage of the insights to improve road infrastructure. So it's really something that's now broadly affecting the entire mobility industry, over and above just insurance, which is, of course, a very, very big use case.
Yeah. So do you think you'll finally do away with how's my driving, dial this number and call my boss from the back of trucks moving forward? Is that going to go away thanks to this technology?
Yeah, we think that sometimes human beings may not be the most unbiased judges of these things. And
Shocking, shocking.
yeah, I think technology can be more unbiased and objective about this.
So you began as a startup, the two of you, right? And I know you have been working together for a very long time. I'm sure you could probably complete each other's sentences at this point. But going from startup to grown up is no small shakes, right? The development of the technology and really convincing people that this technology was going to be acceptable to consumers, acceptable to the insurance industry, really thinking about all different kinds of issues related, for everything from privacy concerns to up to understanding how to process claims and really finding people in very vulnerable spots, being in the middle of a crash and things like that. You're really dealing with all the human components around innovation. Can you tell us a little bit about the evolution as a business from startup to grown up, addressing some of those pieces along the way?
I'm really happy that you brought up the human part of this because I do believe that many tech companies, if you don't consider the consumer, you don't consider the human condition, you're really cutting it short.
Mm.
There's lots of great tech that have never scaled or gotten there because of decisions along the way. And I think one of our wonderful benefits, Hari and I run the company together for a very long time. We met 15 years ago, but having two heads thinking about the right thing to do, considering the technology interaction, but as well as the consumer or the human interaction, has really made us, I think, growing stronger each time, each day, each month, each quarter, each year, because we're always looking at it through a dual lens. Or
Mm.
you wanna tighten that up? You have any thoughts on that piece?
Yeah, I think you said it really well. For us, it's been, for me personally, a truly amazing partnership with Bill. I've learned a lot from him, and I hope he's learned from me as well. In terms of the other part of it, with respect to the human side, I think as something starts, when something starts, especially through a startup, it's never obvious. It never is something that is expected to really work. And in the beginning, there will be a lot of people telling you, as they did, telling us, as they told us, that it's just not going to work. And that was really, for us, the first 4 or 5 years of our journey was a lot of negative feedback. And that's okay. It's important to learn and also try to identify among the 100 reasons not to do something, what are the 1 or 2 reasons to continue to pursue a path. And what we learned through that persuasion process was really to find partners. We don't really think of them as customers. We think of them as partners who share our vision, who buy into it, and we can work together to solve fundamental problems that help them, and in our case, help them help their consumers.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important that we listen a lot more than we talk, especially in the stages of when you're hearing a lot of negative feedback.
So let's talk about that negative feedback phase, because I think it's something that, frankly, any innovator who has a breakthrough idea. I was working yesterday with a client at, well, the biggest energy company in the world. He has to give a presentation to 250,000 employees, right, about open innovation. And we talked about the history of open innovation at the company, and we started talking about ethanol. We started talking about when at some point, someone in that organization was eating corn on the cob, looked at that corn and said, I bet we could get fuel. I bet we could get energy out of this corn. And having to go into work the next day, talking to his fossil fuel buddies in all the cubicles and offices around him and say, what about corn? Rather than this black juice that lives in the ground, right? What if we did something different? Someone has to come in with that. And then surrounded by all of the negativity. Anybody else who's started a business, had a new concept, a breakthrough idea, has faced that initial wall of negativity, but you begin to realize it's just people reflecting their own inability, their own lack of imagination at you, right? As opposed to thinking about what is possible, right? Because they simply haven't experienced it before. Do you feel like that's where it comes from? That first wall of negativity is the inability to imagine the opportunity?
Yeah, I'd like to comment on this. I mean, the people that told us it would never work were not bad people.
Sure,
They're very
of
good,
course.
they're very good at their jobs,
Mhm.
but it's a different lens. Their job isn't to discover the art of possible. Their job is to decide whether we should invest in something or not. I actually viewed those conversations, even the ones where the people might have been, you choose my words carefully here, less interesting to work with. Those people, even their what some might perceive as negative responses, we viewed as a positive because you can see they weren't unintelligent, they were just uninformed or misinformed. And one can see where the opportunity is, even based on what some would view as a negative response. And we viewed it as, well, that's an interesting play, but that view is only today. That view is not 2, 3, 4, 5, 15 years from now.
Mm.
Because if one chose to believe that the adoption of smartphones was going to be omnipresent, which it has been, then what businesses could come from that adoption? And you fill in the blanks there. There's a lot that went into that. I remember one particular potential investor who I had a lot of respect for said, we're not going to invest because we don't know how big it'll be. Now we know it'll be successful, but you and Hari would make a bunch of money, but we might not make any. And I thought that was really telling. And that response was so respectful. It just didn't, this individual who's incredibly smart, makes great bets, didn't have the vision to see how big this was going to get. Where that was actually affirmation for us. Like we got a yes.
Right. You got a yes at the front end of the pitch, right?
Right.
Right. And now you can figure out then how to structure the investment, structure the business, think about the business model in a way that does have downstream effect for the investor, for your partners, the communities, the vendors, et cetera. So that's great. When you think about that early storytelling, right? That early pitching, what was the essence of the pitch?
I think the essence of the pitch for us was it started off very complicated. So the first thing I would say is that it's really important that over a period of time, any innovator simplify it to what ultimately can be absorbed in 30 seconds. And then, of course, you peel off the layers of the onion to get deeper and deeper into it. So what I would say is in the beginning, it was just complicated. It was sort of this idea of sensing for social good, and it was related to traffic, it was related to road conditions, it was safety, it was all over the place. And of course, we were able to hone it down. I think the gist of the story was that there are two assumptions one has to make. Number one, that being able to measure driving quality provides good outcomes in insurance. And there are other things outside of insurance where it benefits. Because if you understand how people drive, that is the primary predict or a key predictor for setting your prices and being able to then control those prices to, being able to control driving or show good driving and get better discounts and so on and so forth. But the fundamental premise, the assumption was that driving quality is related to risk. Now, this is somewhat obvious, but yet it may not be completely obvious because it may be that there's some other factors they're using that are equivalent. But what he said was, if you put control in people's hands, so that's the first hypothesis and assumption. And the second one was that related to these consumer devices like phones and really inexpensive IoT devices that we were starting to develop could provide the level of accuracy needed that were comparable to expensive hardware that was tens or hundreds of dollars. And that's an assumption. Now, on the second one, there were a lot of questions, but I think people generally trusted MIT, academia. They have all these papers, they'll probably figure it out. But not everyone assumed that or thought that. But those were the two hypotheses. So we had to convince people to buy into those. And I have to say that we had ultimately what ended up happening was finding like-minded partners in the insurance and mobility space who were persuaded by the simplicity of the story, put the control in the hands of the drivers and use these consumer technologies and rely on the science to provide accuracy.
Yeah. So that, as you made your way from startup, I like to call it, to grown up phase, right? The stories shifted along with it, right? Because getting started was just convincing people that it could be done, right? Much less figuring out how it would be done, but that it could be done at all was the premise, and that it could make an investor money. How did the story shift over time as the innovation developed? Maybe you can tell us a little bit about how the technology evolved and then the story behind it evolved with it.
Yeah, I'd like to do that in inverse order. I mean, I think for any startup, any folks looking to create something meaningful in the world, you go with your best idea of where it's going to stick. So auto insurance was the first leg of the stool. But as things started to evolve with things like autonomous driving, antiquated roadway systems, safety and security, things like Ring doorbells or ADT, security leaving the home, roadside assistance, crash and claims, the macro industry, the macro addressable market became much bigger and a bit clearer each step of the way. It would be very disingenuous for us to say 15 years ago when we met and had coffee together for the first time, we knew where it was going. But we did know that our premise of consumer adoption through the auto insurance world was a viable business. Now, whether we could execute on it, we didn't know. Whether we could have the best people to work for us, we didn't know, because those are all key elements in success. It's far beyond, in this case, Hari and Sam with a brilliant idea and a guy they asked to join them and me. It's about, can you, all these things, can you get folks to join this journey with you? Can it be meaningful for them so they get up every day and say, I want to change the world by making drivers safer? Because then you get into the human condition part of it that we touched on earlier about all these socioeconomic effects of distracted driving and how that leads to accidents and cost, and using the very devices that are causing the distraction to create safer drivers is really a wonderful journey.
That's really fascinating when you think about it that way, right? The same device that is leading to distracted driving, the underlying technology is the thing that is actually making all of us safer.
Now, I can't take credit for that. That was Professor Balakrishnan who really dug into that early days.
Yeah, I think that is fascinating. The idea of using these phones, which I call weapons of mass distraction, using the same sensors on these devices to improve driving, I think was for me very fascinating, and it's certainly proven out.
The part that you mentioned, Bill, about getting other people on board, when I'm helping people create a story around their breakthrough idea, I often ask them to think about the story they want to tell as a foundation in 4 parts. So what do I want people to remember about this story when I'm done speaking? What do I want people to feel? So, and really assign an emotion, look deep to find the emotive words, to use verbs that, elicit a particular emotion when we're telling the story. What do I need them to actually do? So fund me, put me in touch with a vendor, buy me, whatever it is. And then lastly is, what do I need people to say to the next person they talk to or the next person of consequence when they leave the room? So what will be the first thing out of their mouth after hearing your pitch, your story, receive a demo, et cetera? What will they say to the next person of consequence that they meet? And can we pre-program the story based on their memory, their feeling, and the call to action that come with it? And so often it's what's going to motivate that person to say, I want to be part of that. And if we don't have the say part of the discussion, then we're missing out on the virality that innovation requires in order to take hold. Did you find that as part of your own storytelling?
Of course, I as I was listening to your description, I would say the first thing you need to identify is who the they is in your description.
Sure.
Is it a consumer? Is it an investor? Is it a family member? Is it somebody who's been through tragedy? Is it an automaker? Is it somebody that gets unseen? Is it an emergency room doctor? I mean, so all these who the they is, I don't know if that's proper grammar, but
Yeah.
really requires, and I don't think one can just say, okay, we're doing this and this is how we're going to quote pre-program the conversation. You just talk to as many people as you can with humility, grace, and open mind. Listen to how people perceive your ideas and be open enough to say, gee whiz, I hadn't thought about that. Or, wow, this person gave me an interesting perspective, good or bad. It's all positive. And so I think if you really go through that, the thing about Hari and I, one of the things we have in common, there's many, we also have a lot of theoretical differences, but when you dig under the layers, they're not that different. I would say that humbling yourself to hearing, I don't get it, or have you considered this, or some type of pushback. So many folks are afraid or get sidetracked by somebody saying no. It doesn't mean they're right, but you should consider it. It doesn't mean their view is wrong, but you should honor their view. And so it really depends on who the they is in the description, because I think the message evolves and changes the more people you talk to. I mean, when we met with the folks from SoftBank, they completely saw the vision. They knew it would take time and actually wanted to invest more money in us to make sure they were a long-term investor.
And when you think about those first customers versus current customers and how you pitch them, how do you think that's shifted?
Yeah.
Well, I think they kind of pitched, I'm sorry, Hari, I think they kind of
Go ahead.
pitched us because they shared this vision of innovation and desire to do meaningful work in addition to have proper technology and a business relationship. Hari, I apologize. I cut you off. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I completely agree with Bill. I think that it has changed because, first of all, in the beginning, you have no data. It's almost all intuition. And there's a lot more belief. And it's really important to kind of communicate that in a way that isn't I love the 4 points you mentioned. I think where Bill and I, we actually don't pre-program almost anything. We tend to not over-prepare the details. We have a vision for where we want to go, and then it's part of the conversation because the other person we're talking to, in this case, has an opinion. And so we need to react and kind of engage in that discussion. We continue that philosophy even today, but there's a lot more data that we have today. So in many ways, given the 40 million drivers that we have very quantitative benefits. So now it's a lot more of it is quantitative, numerical, financial, there's ROI models, and so on. And of course, as we go into new products, and we've come up with a certain new products in our history, we're back to the vision, much more of the vision, much more of the belief, much more of painting the picture. But I think as an organization, and as we've added some amazing team members, we've brought a lot more rigor into the process. But in the beginning, a lot of it is on belief. And this is where I think what Bill said about the customers pitching us was just as important, because they have visionary people. They have people who are trying to achieve a something that was never done before as well. And we are their partner in helping them achieve their goals. So I think that partnership-oriented culture was very critical to us. We didn't go in saying we have all the answers. In fact, we went in saying, well, are these even the right questions? And we engaged with our partners.
So tell us a little bit about looking at the future with CMT. What are you seeing as that next evolution of what's coming in telematics and what we're all going to be experiencing in our cars over the next 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, I'm happy to cover that. I think it's a very exciting time. So we're in what I call Telematics 3.0, which is the Telematics 1.0 was kind of 2010 to 15, almost everybody saying no, a few people saying yes to this consumer-oriented phones and things, IoT devices. Then from 2016 or so to 2023, we were in Telematics 2.0, which was really about these programs starting to really scale up. And almost everyone in the space, especially in insurance and in the broader mobility space, starting programs and adopting it. I think there are three key things that are happening in Telematics 3.0, which really, in my view, started at the beginning of this year. The first one is the diversity of data sources. There's now a tremendous diversity of sensor data sources to achieve this mobile sensing. It's phone sensors, IoT devices, connected vehicle data, camera data, and the set of sensors is quite phenomenal, and the prices are going down. And what this means is that we no longer should be in this, my data sensor is better than yours. It's about creating these programs that take whatever data, achieve information from wherever the signal is. That's a word we like to use, is capturing the signal with consumer consent wherever it's possible, and building programs with different types of data. So that's a key aspect of where we've created this platform called the Drivable Fusion platform that accomplishes precisely that makes it so insurance companies and rideshare companies and crash assistance companies, everyone else, don't have to worry about the details of the data. We handle the normalization and the harmonization of the data. So that's the first. The second one is telematics has now reached the point where what we call telematics everywhere. It's no longer just about originally how it was deployed to consumers was you join the program, you measure your data for some period of time, and you will get a discount upon renewal of your insurance premium, and that was that. But now it's pervasive. It starts right before someone enters the insurance company, and then it proceeds through the renewal, but it's a continuous program. It's no longer just a few months. And behavior change is a key aspect of that. People becoming better drivers, lowering the insurance premiums. We have a partner, Discovery Insurance South Africa, who, working with us, has shown that they can reduce crash frequency, the rate of crash, by 24% compared to the rest of the country. That's
Wow.
phenomenal reduction in lives, in crashes, and an increase in the number of lives saved. Being able to use it in crash assistance, being able to use it through the entire claims process, to use it in underwriting. Uber announced a program with their drivers to, if they get a good CMT analytics score, then those drivers can get a greater commission. They get priority pickup in crowded areas such as airports. So that's a place where telematics is now pervasive all the way through. And we think that, in fact, I call this a vehicle paradox, especially since 2017, vehicles have become more and more laden with technology. But if you look at the data and the statistics, crash rates have not come down. In fact, they've increased a little bit.
Because our distraction devices are hitting us. I just think, like, lives saved, yes, and number of gray hairs from parents teaching teenagers how to drive, which was by far the most stressful time of my life, without a doubt. Forget hitchhiking through 5 countries and 2 war zones. Teaching my son to drive was enough to drive me through off a cliff.
I think it's this phone distraction, but there's a lot of other complexities of these vehicles. In fact, it's interesting. Worldwide, 50% of the people who are seriously injured or killed in crashes are outside the car.
Wow.
So it's bicyclists, pedestrians, road workers. It's these people who have nothing to do with the car. And in the US, I think it's about 20%, but worldwide, the number is much, much bigger. And that brings me to the third theme, which is a high degree of personalization of both the driver in terms of their behavior, providing feedback to the driver that's meaningful to them, as well as feedback to the vehicles about how the driving is actually happening, how the vehicle's technology is reacting to conditions, using modern AI, generative AI techniques to complement the AI technologies that we've developed on sensor data to bring a high degree of personalization and adaptation. That's fundamentally important to make our roads and drivers and vehicles safer. So we think that these three themes, that is a massive amount of diversity in data and creating a unified fusion-based program. Number 2, telematics everywhere through the entire mobility ecosystem and process. And number 3, being able to achieve a high degree of personalization of both the driver behavior as well as the vehicle behavior, and changing our infrastructure, adapting our infrastructure to change the way in which traffic signs are put up or where the bus stops are. All of that will lead to a far safer society. So we think that this is an exciting time, the rest of this decade. And then as we enter a world of autonomy, probably in about 10 to 12 years at scale, telematics will be the way in which those vehicles become better, those vehicles' insurance is priced, and so on. So we couldn't be more excited about the future, and we hope to be the partner of choice as that world unfolds.
So I'm going to ask you now the 3 questions I ask every guest on the show, and you can take these collectively or individually. But what do you think is the greatest innovation of all time? Yes, Bill.
Electricity.
100% agree. Mass electrification, starting from the fundamental technology and science to the delivery of electricity, mass electrification systems, by far the most fundamental innovation. Yeah.
So my next question is, we are here to
Well,
dispel the
hold
myth.
on. Do
Yeah.
you understand why we say electricity? Think of everything we do.
Yes, oh,
Without
for
it,
sure.
it's not possible.
A very, very popular response on the show, for sure. And my next question is, if you could join any innovation team in history, which team would you have joined?
So I'm doing a lot of reading right now about the first moon landing, the lunar landing, and there's a whole, it's very topical in the world, whether we actually did it or not. And I find the competing arguments to be fascinating. So I think that might have been fun just to.
The
just
lunar
to-
landing team.
Yeah, I mean, think about what they were trying to do and why they were trying to do it, and the pressure on those folks at the time. They were trying to do it with geopolitical issues with Russia and just the world. And I don't know, those folks seem like a really, really fascinating, mission-driven, pardon the pun, bunch of folks.
Yeah.
I'm pretty happy that I'm a part of MIT CSAIL and CMT. I think they're fantastic teams. I wouldn't really change that. But if I were pressed to make a choice outside of what I've experienced, I would have loved to be in the 1920s and 30s and at the advent of quantum mechanics and the entire revolution in theoretical physics.
Wow. Yes. Yes, please. And lastly, what's something that an innovation you'd love to see in the world that doesn't yet exist, something that really pisses you off, or something that would inspire you, or you think is an incredible opportunity that no one's taken advantage of yet? What's the innovation that's not here now that you wish was?
I think that the most important challenge of our time, for me personally, I believe, is combating misinformation. There is such a thing as truth, and I think that it is important that all of us who are either directly or tangentially connected with information appreciate and try to figure out a way to combat misinformation to get at the truth.
It's exhausting, especially as a parent, to have your children say things that they believe in every fiber of their being that are just statistically or factually inaccurate. And that wouldn't be my answer. My answer would be, I really believe we have to do a better job with food and water supplies for human beings. And I don't mean necessarily genetically modified organisms, but I mean just making sure that we can take care of people in ways that should be so easy for us. There's elements of it that's happening, clean water for all and things like that, but there has to be a better global way to do this, because we have some countries, not being specific, that are just gluttonous, and others that can't feed their children. And that is just insanity to me.
That's a better answer than mine.
Here.
Yeah, I'm with you, Bill. Great answer.
Well, Hari and Bill, I'm so grateful to have had you on the show today. Where can people get in touch with you if they want to learn more about the work that you're doing? Where should they find you?
Hari's going to give out his cell phone number. They all
Nice.
I would maybe type my name on Google, and I'm sure there's a lot of links. I'm also active on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I would say
Fantastic.
reaching out through the company on LinkedIn or information pages on the CMT website. We're all there and handle our own LinkedIn accounts, so we're available.
Fantastic. Well, Bill Powers and Hari Balakrishnan, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. What a great discussion. And now at least scratching a little bit of the surface about telematics and how it's impacting you every day and the stories we tell to really understand it more deeply. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Susan.
Pat.